Hello, and welcome to the first in our latest BDP podcast series, Innovation Applied. I'm Michelle Xuereb, Head of Innovation at BDP Quadrangle, and this week we delve into UK's burgeoning innovation districts and ask what we as designers and city leaders can do to make them successful. With a booming life sciences industry leading the way, investment in R&D infrastructure is already delivering positive socioeconomic benefits to the north of England and Scotland. We can see a boost in social mobility through attraction of talent and cultural changes in areas like Liverpool's Knowledge Quarter and Manchester's Oxford Road corridor. These are areas of activity, creativity, and modern discovery. And with new funding now available, we should be looking at them as exemplars of city regions that brings together science, health, technology, culture, and education. So how can we ensure that good design, placemaking, and planning is at the forefront of the UK's innovation districts? How do we signal to investors that there is an even greater opportunity for growth and prosperity? And how do we create the right quality of development with good public realm, green infrastructure, and technology-enhanced, genuinely impactful buildings at its heart? To join the debate with me today are three inspirational leaders from science and technology industry in the UK. Deb Hetherington is the Head of Innovation Ecosystems and Partnerships at Bruntwood SciTech. Eve Roodhouse is Chief Officer, Culture and Economy at Leeds City Council. And Vicky Casey, Architect Director and Head of BDP's Leeds Studio. Welcome to you all. I'll start us off with our first question here. So how important is co-location, clustering of businesses, and the creation of chance encounters for true innovation? Vicky, do you want to start us off?
Hi, it's nice to be here with everybody this afternoon. Certainly the kind of co-location and clustering of businesses is nothing new from an architectural perspective, and it's something that we take really seriously in the innovation in science, research and development sector, but also within kind of the education, higher education sector. It comes up quite often, and then in international conferencing as well. The idea that creating chance encounter by the way that you design buildings has a positive impact on the psychology and the behaviour of the people who are using those buildings on a day-to-day basis. And I guess when we're thinking about innovation buildings in the kind of science and medtech sectors, there's maybe a feeling that if you cast back a decade, there's a sort of traditional sort of siloed thinking setup that can happen, where if each building has its own labs and everything the building is potentially kind of enabling a lack of connection, whereas you can make some simple moves to kind of change that around. And I think that's something that BDP's been doing successfully for a number of years. One of the examples would be the Strathclyde Learning and Teaching Building that does that vertically with a kind of atrium space that spills out over some open circulation space with little pods that kind of hang out over the side, so that if you're sat and having a breakout kind of meeting, you're very aware of all of the other people going past in the building. So potentially you're optimizing the chances of bumping into somebody else who might be really beneficial to that conversation that you're having. And then, as I said, it comes across in all sorts of other sectors as well. And one of my favourite places to go for a conference is the Royal College of Physicians in London, which is a Grade 1 listed building, one of the kind of most prominent first post-war buildings in London. It's kind of a brutalist design. It's got an amazing yellow carpet and this open stairwell. And if you ever go to a conference there, you only have to go into that space and cast your eye around to be able to see absolutely everybody else that is at the conference at the same time as you, because of the way that space is kind of prominently, the staircase is prominent, it's extra wide, and it's got spill out space onto it, and it's really beautiful to be in the space, but it's also really super beneficial to just very, very quickly realize who's there with you, which obviously at a conference, one of the benefits is to be able to meet and connect with people that you know and people that you maybe have met once or twice, but maybe a year ago. And I think within the SciTech and innovation space, it's that kind of, sometimes they're not there's a kind of stereotype that maybe that siloed thinking is not something that you necessarily really want to go out and definitely mix with everybody. So if the building's doing absolutely everything it can to encourage that, then that's really beneficial.
I think that's a really good point, Vicky, that piece about the buildings being the vehicle to bring people together. And that's really what we want when we're talking about innovation ecosystems. And Deb, I'm sure, from a people perspective, you'd probably have a lot to share around this, given your role and what you do. Love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Vicky, really good points around the design of the space. And I don't think you used the word water cooler moment because it's a ridiculously overused term and almost cringeworthy. But if you can design spaces that almost serendipitously bring people together around a water cooler within a space, you've already ticked a massive box in terms of innovation ecosystems. The bit that I do within Bruntwood SciTech, so absolutely nothing really I couldn't tell you a square foot if I saw it, in terms of measurements, but the innovation ecosystem piece within our tech hubs and innovation corridors and science parks is the bit that I get involved in. And that's developing out a series of activities across events, programs like accelerators and incubators, really cool, interesting activities, both across community and knowledge transfer, working with universities, etc., to make sure entities based within our spaces can work together and collaborate. And I think, clustering, there's so much evidence out there that shows that clustering businesses, particularly with perhaps a sector-specific focus, achieves massive economic and social success within those areas. And it's all a part of that open innovation piece, right? So we've moved away from closed innovation post-World War, science parks that have big barriers. These are our secrets, to really acknowledging the fact that the smartest people don't work in your business. Yeah, the likelihood is that the smartest people in the world don't work in your business. So if we are going to compete on an innovation level within an innovation space, in order to compete on a global level, we understand that chances are we do need to collaborate across businesses. And I think that is so integral to an innovation ecosystem, having businesses come together to create new innovations to compete on a global scale. And a really good example of that in Bruntwood SciTech is our Oxford Road, which you mentioned earlier, Michelle, the Oxford Road Innovation Corridor, which is particularly our City Labs developments, 1, 2, 3, and 4 buildings that are absolutely full of really interesting life science businesses, co-located right next to our hospital trust. So 4 of our key hospitals within Manchester. But on top of that co-location, we also have the teams that I work with who create pathways for the innovation that's being designed from industry within those labs being tested within the hospitals themselves. So again, we are a propco, but what we do above that is we ensure that our regions have the strengths and pathways to be able to actually commercialize its innovation and get it out there. And clustering is such a big part of that.
Right. So that's huge. I love this piece about, you've got the physical space, but then you've got to create those activities and place people beside each other. And your point that the smartest people don't necessarily work in our own businesses, right? Like to be co-located beside somebody that does robotics. I remember hearing about an engineering firm, and what they did is they had these drones that they were using, and they started to understand what they could do in terms of looking at building envelopes. So they started to combine what we do as architects with what these other engineers did with drones, and suddenly they had a system where they could be scanning facades of buildings instead of hanging themselves down the sides. And you wouldn't have that if you didn't have those things overlapping.
And I'd say that most things exist now. Yeah, we live in a world where most things have been created. That's an umbrella statement. But the best innovations come from 2 really smart technologies or ideas coming together, right? And I think that is a huge outcome of clustering.
Yeah, totally agree. Eve, I wondered if there was anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, because I work for a city council, obviously, I also think about this on a city scale. And what's really interesting about some of the things I've been listening to, if you think about a city like Leeds, we have a really compact, walkable city centre. And that's a real asset to us because in terms of supporting innovation, It's also about the spaces in between buildings and people kind of bumping into each other in that way and having relationships where they actually encounter one another, not just at formal times and moments, but on the way between meetings and activities. And the spaces that Deb was describing, where you create collaboration spaces where events happen, then also become really important places where different people from the city can know they can find one another. In Leeds, there are a number of spaces and places where I would specifically go, including Platform at Bruntwood's building, where I know I would see key people from the innovation ecosystem, and I could speak to them just by sitting in that space and occupying it for an hour or so. And I think that's really, really important and powerful for cities.
I love that you took us to the scale of cities and talking about not just the buildings themselves, but the spaces in between and how important they are for chance encounter. I mean, I think it's a good segue to the next question, which is really about how we can bring innovation forward for everyone. And this question of, is this the true definition of leveling up? So Eve, even maybe just continuing this from a city economic growth perspective, I'd be interested to hear your take on this.
Yeah. So listen, globally, we're facing massive challenges, from climate change to poverty and inequality, which is growing in most cities, but also kind of inclusive growth. So that kind of the inequality and the health side of things as well. And the only way we're going to solve those challenges is by engaging everybody in innovation, because we know that the best ideas come forward by having the most diverse set of founders bringing forward those business ideas. So you have to bake in that principle then, to thinking both about the physical spaces you're going to create and the business support programs that you're going to put in place to make sure that anyone who has a good idea has a path to bring that forward. And that's easily said and very, very difficult to do, because we know that a lot of the mature ecosystems in the world are actually the opposite. They kind of actually have boundaries in place that prevent people from being able to achieve. We know that just on the basis of gender and the amount of money that goes into female founders versus male founders and investment. So I think there's a lot of work that we've got underway, not just in Leeds but across the UK, thinking about how we can make sure that we build that inclusivity in. And I think colleagues that work in physical built environment space, architects, and those that create buildings can also play their part in this, because they can think about how buildings can be open, as Deb was saying earlier, not closed science parks where only people that are employees go in there, but creating public spaces, engaging spaces where people might just find it permeable and go inside and out and feel comfortable and know that that space is for them. So it's everything, and it's everybody with their different roles to play that needs to really drive that inclusivity in terms of innovation. And all of that together does indeed support what you might define as levelling up, because it's all about us all collectively trying to find those solutions for the challenges we're facing.
Right. And just this piece that diversity and equity actually brings us more of what we want. I think that's such an important point to make, that combined with the business support system being a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's a case of, we know that from the research that McKinsey have done over several years, that it's a head and a heart thing, diversity and inclusion in both in businesses generally and in innovation, because you get more successful businesses the more diverse your leadership team is. So it's a no-brainer, but it's also a way to make sure that you're getting social mobility and addressing the inequality that might exist in your city.
I'm sure both myself and Deb probably want to add something on this one. I think what Eve, you were saying about the kind of placemaking perspective is so relevant, because how do you make somebody feel like they belong, even if it's open, even if you've got really good public realm outside, it can still feel like maybe it's not for me if it's a place that you've never been to before, or you think, even a university campus can be really intimidating and off-putting, where it's there but it's not for me, or So how do you signify that it's for everybody? And part of what I'm thinking about is stuff that happens in the Bright building in Manchester. I'm sure you do hackathons and things, Deb, that maybe you can talk about, but that's a building that BDP delivered for Bruntwood on the Manchester-Oxford Road that has a really great outreach programme, I think, that Bruntwood facilitate, which the spaces that we've delivered are, so that people are going in from a young age and feeling that they are welcome in that building and welcome in that space. And therefore, if you maybe went back as a young entrepreneur or for a job application, it's not that you've never stood foot in the door before, because you've actually been as to a workshop there or to something else as part of the outreach program that's happened before. So that's really important. And I think the high quality external public realm space around, like, wouldn't it be great if there was a skate park on the edge of one of these things or something, so that it's not just people in suits having a sandwich, but there's something that signifies that it's for a wider demographic of the community. And it makes me think about my brother, who's a scientist, and he did his PhD at UPenn. And at the time, I was architectural assistant working beside City Hall at the centre of Philadelphia. And I used to occasionally go out and have lunch with him, and there was like the best falafel food truck on the campus at UPenn, and he really wanted to go and share that with me. So I would go out and have this really great falafel of a lunchtime, just because there was a great food truck that served I had no need to be on that campus, but that brought me there because of a personal connection I had. And wouldn't it be great if we had some research that said this scientific discovery happened because of the great falafel, and how much could we do by, that's in a scenario where you've got scientists. I mean, my brother was very much part of the international community there, which again maybe has a connection with culture and with food and with difference. And just by doing something as simple as that inside some high quality public realm. So it's not just that you've provided an outdoor space that connects through the city that feels welcoming, but it's that you've put something there that, again, maybe it's creating that water cooler moment of the shared falafel.
That should be the title of this podcast, the shared falafel.
But Dev, taking us back to reality, maybe you want to mention something about the hackathons and the outreach program within.
Well, listen, my neck hurts from nodding so much at both of your responses there in terms of the points you've made. And to come back to the question of how do we bring innovation forward for everyone, for me, it's a strategic plan across both public and private sector within regions. So in Leeds, for example, with regards to the Innovation Arc, there is an Innovation Arc board, which is made up of both public and private sector who have shared objectives and shared vision. And inclusive innovation is so tied up in those objectives. And it starts at planning phase. It doesn't start at, we've built this now. What do we do? How do we bring in? How do we diversify? How do we tick the EDI box? It actually starts at the planning stage, and it's embedded in every single aspect of that journey. And I think that is something Leeds do incredibly well with their inclusive growth strategy across the city, and also with the board that I just mentioned. In terms of really specific things across projects that I've worked with and run, again, it's looking at, like Eve said, about the business support that's wrapped up around that. And as Bruntwood, we identified that there was a huge gap in representation of female founders. So we designed a female founders incubator, which we've now run across 3 of our sites. And that's taking on early stage female founders, giving them free desk space and then access to the ecosystem within our buildings and partner network around IP, funding, marketing, business model, tech specialists, grant writers, and all of that is a free program for a 6-month period. And we take them on a journey, give them a mentor, and that's a really big one of our sort of flagships around that, bringing innovation forward for everyone. And again, Eve is absolutely right. There are so many pockets of untapped innovation across the globe because we haven't fostered those groups before, and we're finally getting there. And wow, we've got some amazing examples of innovation coming out of those programs. A quick one on the Bright building in Manchester. We run insight days for students across the universities in all of the regions that we work in, and invite students into our spaces to do exactly that, Vicky. They aren't used to corporate worlds. They aren't used to tech centres. They aren't used to those spaces, and they can be so incredibly daunting. So So to give the confidence to individuals who wouldn't necessarily go for jobs in those spaces, we invite them into our spaces while they're still at university to go in a cohort of students, to talk to the businesses, to look at the environment. And to be honest with you, most of our spaces are tech spaces, so they're wearing hoodies and shorts anyway. So immediately there's a welcome environment. But it's absolutely key in bringing innovation forward for everyone is creating an open environment and a safe environment for people to access those spaces.
Yeah, I love that you noticed a need, you were paying attention and saw this need, that there were no you wanted more tech leaders that were female, and providing that support system to actually make that happen is really quite incredible. And really something that we need, but you have to sort of notice it first. And, you talked about sort of having aligned goals and providing that support at every step of the journey. It's not just something you sort of do once. You don't just build the space and it happens, but you're in there sort of moving the parts, paying attention to what's happening and enabling that. Like, that's extremely powerful.
So that's one thing, a term that I use way too many times, Michelle. A building can be built and left, an innovation ecosystem cannot. And that's why we have teams within our spaces that ensure that those partnerships and that activity continues. And that's really, really a key mission in Bruntwood.
Absolutely. I'm one of the co-directors of what we call BDP Lab. And so it's really about fostering a culture of innovation within BDP. And one of the things we have is this innovation hub, and it's a tech sort of piece. It's a platform where a senior person within the business will come to us, myself and my co-director, Steve Merida. They'll come to us with a business problem that they want to solve. And they say, well, let's see what people have to say about it. And we put a question out to all of BDP. So that's over 1,300 people across 19 studios. The question goes out and we get feedback. And our most recent one that we did was called City Insights. And it was just looking for really small things that have been done in cities that have had a huge impact, and mostly around sort of design and programming, again, the combination. And it was really fascinating what we got back. And then, there's sort of prizes, and then we take those ideas and we try to use the voice of the lab to amplify them. Again, it encourages people to step in, and you get a real range of people at every level of all different cities participating, which I find absolutely fascinating.
I love that, and there is examples of it, for the want of a better word, an arrogance, where you think, oh, I have the solution here, but to go out and actually collect data and insights from 1,300 people and not think I know the solution. I'm actually going to use a data-led approach here with people's opinions and what their lived experiences are, I think is absolutely brilliant.
And again, it levels the playing field and invites everyone in, and we're hoping over time, we'll get more and more people to participate, right? It takes time to sort of, you talked about even getting the confidence to go into a space, and this is sort of a similar thing. We're inviting you, but now we have to build the culture that supports people coming in. The next question is really around attracting the best kind of talent. We talked a little bit about this already, but I think this will take us sort of to a different level. So how does the quality of the place support the attraction and retention of the best talent? And then what about at the scale of a city? So what are the unique qualities of a city that can attract talent?
So I think from our perspective, we do quite a lot of high quality innovation spaces for many different kind of global clients, and there's definitely a trend of kind of really high quality buildings that are designed to a high level that also have a really high sustainability criteria about them. One of them that's in the design process at the minute is the John Innes Centre, which would be a net zero labs building. And obviously a lot of people talk about net zero and a lot of people talk about the SciTech sector, and putting those two things together is no easy task. They kind of sit at odds, a bit like the media environment sector, where, they're both quite intensive energy use buildings. So with really high criteria for vibration and for structural requirements. So meeting those net zero goals in that sector is particularly challenging, but again, it's something that's really fulfilling for the design team to be innovative in the delivery of how we do architecture that way. Another one being Project Apple that we're working on, which is a Hetherington concept design, which we're taking through as the delivery architect, and that's got a massive amount of CLT timber in it, which brings no end of fire engineering, detailed design questions that we are solving, and also being Hetherington, a lot of parametric modelling, which is pushing us quite far, which it will be absolutely beautiful when it's completed. Both of them will. And it also, but like these are the kind of key scientific anchor companies who are really requesting the cutting edge of modern buildings that embody their values for high quality and sustainability credentials, because that's the message that they are giving out as their brand and as their, if they want to be taken seriously as being at the head of innovation, they want to be in a building which speaks to that. So on a building level, I think that's definitely a trend to have that quality. And I wonder, Michelle, whether you could talk about 80 Atlantic with the kind of structural timber frame that's in that, and then the quality of kind of occupant, because that was done speculatively. Am I right? Is that?
It was, yeah. It was done by a private developer who really uses design as their differentiator. To them, they are city builders. They're also city residents. This is where they live. And to them, they wanted to create a place that would attract kind of the tech sector into their space. In the end, they got Universal Music, which was amazing. So that was, again, another truly innovative business, very visible from the outside. It was the first mass timber office building of this size to be built here in a century, which was fantastic. And it also meant that we had to go through certain kind of approvals processes. You talked about fire engineering. That was a huge part of it. And so when I think about what's required for innovation, I think that's a whole other part, is this regulatory framework that not just sort of permits it, but is transparent enough to actually encourage it. And that was just a spectacular opportunity getting to work on that project. And since then, we've started to see our fire code changing to allow us to do 12 stories in mass timber. And we have a few of those on the books right now. And then we have, by next year, we're going to be permitted to do 18 stories, which is really quite fascinating.
So that's like the building level, I suppose, isn't it? Where we're seeing that trend. But I think from a city level, each city must have a certain quality about it. And I think the thing that really annoys me in the UK, it's kind of both a blessing and a curse to have the kind of Cambridge sort of real anchor draw factor. But I'm sitting in Leeds and I'm thinking each of the northern cities has a real specialism, a real quality about it. And there's something about attracting key anchor institutions and having a kind of real individual specialism that I think we need to shout about more ourselves, and then collectively as a group of northern cities to say, Liverpool is great for this, and Manchester is great for this, and Leeds is great for this, and Newcastle is great for this. And collectively there's like a unique voice, but there's also that quality there. So I don't know, Eve, do you have thoughts on?
Yeah, so I think I was just I met with some senior people from the Financial Conduct Authority in Leeds yesterday who moved an office into Leeds about 2 years ago. And it was really interesting hearing them play back to us how successful that move has been for them in terms of the talent they've been able to secure, about the improved retention they've been able to get, and how much the staff love being in Leeds. They even talked about the fact that their financial planning is now having to advocate for teams wanting to come to Leeds for away days to meet other people from their teams, because they want to come to the city and experience the city because they like it so much. So it was interesting because we were reflecting on exactly what you're just saying, is that the beauty of having some great second cities is that each of those cities has a uniqueness to it and a different feel and a particular energy that those cities bring. And I think we need to tap into that for the whole of the UK economy, really. We've had kind of growth that's sort of just been, our economy's just been knocking around pretty much zero growth, very limited growth. And it's about tapping into what's special about each of our second cities that's going to be really vital to get that growth going forwards, and very specifically thinking about innovation. So building on that a bit more and listening to you both, I think there's a definitive move to creating really high quality spaces for businesses, because, you know, during COVID, a lot of people went to move to work from home, and businesses are now having to create spaces that make people want to come into work. And when people come into the office, they want to be able to collaborate, and they want to really get the most out of being around their colleagues. So I think that's pushed businesses really into thinking about types of spaces that they need. And certainly we've seen a massive reset across Leeds where businesses have exited spaces they might have been in, moved into new offices, and had those offices designed and creating spaces which have, you know, much more space for collaboration and innovation in them. And that's companies that might not be their primary purpose innovation, but with digital companies in particular, wanting that space for people to come together is definitely not going to go away. So it's a trend I think you'll see across all cities, in the essence of wanting to have that reason for people to come back in. But alongside those great workspaces, you've got to also have great communities, so that people want to not just come in to sort of say maybe be in their workspace, but to be able to connect with others through networks that exist in some of the spaces where people are coming together to meet, to explore, shared problems, to find out about how they can grow their businesses. So all of that's really important. And then we mustn't forget that layered on top of that still is culture and the offer that a city has that makes it a great place to live. Because after all, work is very important. We all love it, but it's only one part of our lives. And we want to be in cities because of the quality of the cultural offer as well, and the spaces and places that exist there. So all of that combination is really, really important for city leaders to think about in terms of, really nurturing strong innovation ecosystems. And then in turn, architects and those that kind of look at the built environment side of things need to sort of also be thinking about that future city lens, about creating those connections, those reasons to be together, and the resilience into the future to make sure that all of those things are working really well together.
Well, I saw Deb nodding. I saw Deb nodding through the whole thing, so I'm assuming, Deb, you've got something you want to add on to this.
I do, and predominantly around the use of space, actually, Eve. Your points around how businesses are using the spaces across certainly Leeds, and we found in most of our sites across the UK, they don't necessarily want traditional office space anymore. The use of the collaboration spaces, the interactive whiteboards, those spaces that people can come together and be creative, we're finding a massive uplift in usage of those. And so the flex of the space itself is really, really key, and we're taking that into serious consideration as we design those spaces now as well. So retrospectively looking at how they can be used more effectively, but then also going forward as we build. And, again, why do people come into the spaces? We've got, let's use Leeds as an example. We've got an amazing program manager who delivers really interesting innovation activities. And then we've also got a community manager who does the fun stuff. So they do the beer and pizzas on a Thursday, or they do the, cocktail making, or they do the wreath making at Christmas. And we bring our communities together for that activity, and the talent, it's huge, especially for smaller business, the startup ecosystem, right? Where their businesses don't necessarily have the internal people or HR or whatever to be able to put those things on themselves. We as an organization create that sort of space for individuals to come together, both in their own business, but also the wider businesses across the SME, the small media enterprises. And the talent stays for that, right? So they come for the business and they stay for those opportunities, and they stay because of that wider offering.
Right. I think that it's so interesting because it's tying us back to that value of co-locating and creating that community, and how that also then attracts talent. I mean, it's all sort of weaving together.
Yeah, and we definitely feel the benefit of that. I mean, we're a big company, but we take a very small space within the Bruntwood building in Leeds, and so I have to be a huge advocate for what Bruntwood do, because why would I ever silo myself in an individual building as we grow? Because even as a satellite of a big company, the benefit of that networking every time I go and get a cup of coffee, like I talk to somebody from a different industry, from a different part of the ecosystem, literally every time I go and get a cup of coffee. Whereas if I was in a siloed traditional office setup, I would just be talking to my own people, which is lovely, and it's great to talk to your own people. You should definitely talk to your own people. But the add-on value of that is really something, and I think that's the way that it's going to go. We should all be doing that.
I just wanted to throw out one last question, which is really about what UK cities can learn from other global SciTech cities. Deb, I'm wondering if you wanted to start us off with that one, just sort of a quick response to that one around learning from global cities.
I think there was a best practice piece. I think that I'm studying a postdoctorate in innovation ecosystems, and have visited a multitude of innovation ecosystems across the world. And I pick up different elements from each in terms of success and best practice. But what I would say is I'm not a fan of replicating or trying to create a framework that already exists, because let's use Leeds as an example. The puzzle pieces in Leeds are very different to the puzzle pieces in Toronto and in Lisbon and in New York. And so we need to use our puzzle pieces in Leeds really effectively to put them together to create success. We can take from the little bits of each of those puzzle pieces from different cities, but I would hate to kind of poach a framework exclusively from another element. We touched on Lisbon, and I visited Barcelona 2022 last year, and they have an incredible success story over there, and their tech ecosystem is second to none. But one of the biggest reasons is they've got the highest number of dev talent, so tech development talent per capita than any other space in the globe. And we can't just as Leeds go, okay, cool, we'll do that, can we? I mean, there's no immediate roadmap for that. So so I think when you look at how you can improve or create a roadmap to success within an innovation ecosystem, you need to look at the short, medium, and long term. What are the quick wins? What can we do really, successfully here? Which for me, Leeds is doing, Manchester's doing, and that's for me massively around collaboration, working with public and private sector partners, again with shared objectives. But then you need to look at your medium and your long term. And again, we touched on the election, which is coming up, and it is very hard, specifically from a policy and a funding perspective, to have longer term goals, because of that cyclical nature of our government. But I think any strategy around improving an innovation ecosystem needs to have that short, medium, and long. And yes, you need to take best practice from other cities or regions that got it right, but don't get lost in that Silicon Valley have done it, so we can do it that way. That will not work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every city has its own sort of fingerprints. And I love that idea of making it specific to that place rather than just trying to imitate it. I think you guys have made some incredible points right here. I love this piece about looking at it at the scale of buildings and how that can both attract talent but also encourage cross collaboration and ideas crossing different sectors, which can really lead to sort of deeper innovation. This piece that buildings aren't quite enough, that we also need to have the programming, and that falafel truck, that's going to become the new the new image in my mind for what innovation can be. And also this strategic planning at this both across public and private sector, and having those shared goals and embedding diversity into what we're doing right from the very beginning, not just as an add-on, but something that's there from the beginning. I loved the idea of the skateboard park that allows you to sort of welcome people that might think that it's not for them. And then also this piece, of course, about creating city-specific frameworks while also staying open to learning from other global cities that are doing this. I wanted to thank you all for a truly inspirational discussion, and I'm certain we're going to continue to inspire the application of innovation in buildings and places that match our ambition and our creativity. For more information and details of our Innovation Applied campaign, please visit www.bdp.com.